Good morning, class. Welcome to the Eastern Roman Empire. This week, we're going to look at the story of this eastern half of the Roman Empire that, unlike the western half we studied last week, which disappears and then transitions into feudalism, the Eastern Roman Empire will actually live on for another 1,000 years. Quite an extraordinary story. We're going to look at why and what were the characteristics of this Eastern Roman Empire. But we're going to start first by examining the question of Christianity. Christianity, this religion that we saw, comes out of Judaism. Christianity, an Oriental religion, spread throughout what was the Roman Empire, spread throughout Europe, east and west, after 300 CE. So we're going to look at why is it that Christianity proved so popular. And that's three questions I'm going to ask you about that in the Google form you're going to fill after watching this video. Number two, what were the main characteristics of this eastern half of the Roman Empire, Byzantium as it's also known, or the Byzantine Empire, this empire that survived another 1,000 years after the western half of the Roman Empire disappeared. So let's start with Christianity. Why was it so popular? Well, number one, around 200 and continuing to 300, you have a decline of faith in the old Roman gods. Romans just stopped believing in their ancestral gods, Jupiter, Minerva, etc. They stopped attending services at their temples, and they started to turn to new religions that were emerging in the eastern half of the Roman Empire, notably Christianity. Christianity, of course, being the religion that believes that Jesus Christ is our Savior. And this is crucial, the figure of Christ as a Savior, and understanding the appeal, why Christianity was so attractive to Romans beginning around 200, 300. Christianity was attractive because the Romans were experiencing, beginning in the 3rd century, as we saw last week, a very profound crisis. The Roman Empire was, in at least parts, falling apart under the blows of disease, of crop failures, of climate change. The weather was getting much colder. There were military and civil war problems and the invasion of non-European peoples. All of this provoked a deep spiritual crisis and other forms of crises. And people quite naturally turned to a religion that offered hope, such as Christianity. Finally, there's a third reason for the success of Christianity, particularly in the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which is that Roman emperors themselves, after around 300, decided to adopt Christianity as an official religion. So let's look at the role of Roman emperors. Specifically, we're going to look at Constantine the Great, who's in many ways the first Byzantine emperor, the first emperor of the eastern half of the Roman Empire, who adopted Christianity and ultimately made it central to the Eastern Roman Empire. After his reign, all Roman emperors, with one exception, would be Christian Roman emperors. And then we'll look at Justinian, who lived a little later, around the 6th century, who also was a very great believer and was famous for having built the great church of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. First, Constantine the Great. Why do we focus on him? Why is he so important? Number one, in 313, Constantine the Great passes the Edict of Toleration of Christianity. This is a proclamation, official proclamation of the Roman state that declares Christianity to be legal. And furthermore, on his deathbed, Constantine will convert to Christianity. And this is a very, very important moment, because this is when the Roman Empire, the one that survives in the East, becomes Christian. Okay. Number two, Constantine the Great is also incredibly important because he decides to move the capital of the Roman Empire from its western half, from Rome, to a new city he establishes in Constantinople in the Eastern Roman Empire. Why does he do that? A couple of reasons. One, the Western Roman Empire is increasingly under threat of invasion from non-Roman peoples. Number two, the Eastern Roman Empire was much richer. Not only could it be more militarily defended, more easily militarily defended from invading populations, but also it was much richer. So it made a lot of sense to create a new capital in the East. Of course, the consequences would be enormous. What this means is that the Eastern Roman Empire would be saved for another 1,000 years, as the resources of the emperor would focus on defending it and on promoting its well-being and wealth, whereas the Western Roman Empire would collapse, as we saw last week, after 476, and ultimately produce a very different system we call feudalism, right? So let's move on to Constantinople itself, which was built and founded by Constantine. Constantinople means the city of Constantine. One of the reasons the Eastern Roman Empire would survive, would exist as long as it would, has a lot to do with the decision to place the capital in Constantinople. Constantinople could be easily defended. It was placed on this peninsula here. This peninsula here, defended on all sides by water, and on the land side by huge walls that Constantine first built. And Constantinople would, despite attempts by invaders and Muslims and others to conquer Constantinople, it would never fall to the enemy until 1453. And in fact, when it did fall ultimately in 1453, that's when the Byzantine Empire ceased to exist. So again, a decision Constantine took, which was very, very influential. Let's move on to Justinian, the other great emperor that we're going to be discussing. Justinian the Great lived not around 300, but around the end of the around the 6th century. He's very famous for many different reasons, but I really want to focus, as I did in the case of Constantine, on his relationship with Christianity. He was a very religious person and is particularly known for having built the great church of Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, in Constantinople, seen illustrated here on the left. This is the inside of this great cathedral or church. This is the outside. This church really symbolizes the relationship, the powerful relationship between the Eastern Roman Empire or state, the Byzantine state, and religion. These two factors really account for the survival of the Eastern Roman empires well into the 15th century. The role of religion and the adoption of religion by the emperor. And specifically, of course, the religion, by religion, we're talking about Christianity. Anyway, what I want to end here with is discussing a question I ask you later in the courses. I want you to think about how this Byzantine Empire was different. What happened in the Byzantine Empire in Eastern Europe was different from what happened in Western Europe. Well, the first big difference is well into the 13th century, the Byzantine Empire had huge cities, big cities on a scale that had existed much earlier under the Roman Empire, but which ceased to exist in the western half of the Roman Empire after its fall. This is a reconstruction of Constantinople in the 13th century, a huge city, well populated at a time when in Western Europe, cities were small with smaller populations. So that's one big difference. Big cities continue to exist in the East. Secondly, of course, in the Eastern Roman Empire, the trade and commerce continue to flourish. Big cities are still present. The Roman Emperor continues to rule as a supreme ruler. And to all effects, we continue to see a centralized, powerful empire in the East. This is very different from what happens in the West we saw last week, right? After 476, the Western Roman Empire disappears, collapses. We have a collapse of disintegration of the economy. Cities vanish, they disappear, and will only really come back much later. And of course, we have the emergence of feudalism by 1000. Very different system, and a fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire into separate barbarian kingdoms, which ultimately will produce the countries much later, we'll see. Okay, different from Eastern Europe, where the Roman Empire continues to exist up until 1453. All right.